culture, community, architecture, home. Good evening. We're so happy to be in Bangalore and to launch our book here at this wonderful space. Robert, thank you for being here. Is my mic on?
No? Yeah, there we go. There we go.
Now it's okay?
Great. Lovely to see you all. Very excited. I'm extremely honored to be part of your
Thank
book
you for being
launch.
here.
It's an absolutely fantastic book. And I want to start with one of my first observations, and it leads to the first question. Charles Bukowski, the writer, said, many people write because they want to be known as writers, not because something's driving them over the edge. Okay, and I think the same can be said of photography, of any art form. So, especially I think because this is a self-published book, and I hope at the end of the evening we can come to that a bit. What was pushing both of you over the edge with this project? Like, why? It's hard. It's grueling to publish a book, to self-publish it. So, what is that drive that was pushing you over the edge to make this?
Well, Robert, to be honest, it all started during the pandemic. You know, I have lived across 4 countries and 4 continents for 2 decades. And during the pandemic, I found myself locked down in the home in Bombay in which I grew up. And it was then that I was reflecting on the meaning of home, being locked down. It was also a time when I was growing my photography practice. And I happened to order a whole bunch of books from Amazon, one of which was on this topic of home, The Edge of Faith by Prabhuda Dasgupta, the late fashion and fine art photographer. And his book just had such soulful portraits of Goan homes that it inspired me to go in and visit these homes and see them from the inside, having always just seen them from the outside. And that's kind of where this journey began. And I think his book was a great source of inspiration and a great starting point from where I started my own exploration.
And I think for me, I work as an art curator. I moved to Goa and made it my home about 14 years ago. And working in Goa, working so closely with artists, I learned a lot about Goa. I learned so much about these homes, the style of architecture. And when Ulka's project sort of drew me in, and I wanted to know more. So it's that curiosity sort of just drew me in, and I think these stories needed to be told. And I was really happy to be a part of it. And it's a really, these quiet, sort of gentle images, and I think they portray the soul of these homes really well. So we had to put it out there. Yeah. So, Ulka, there are so many homes in this style of architecture dotted through, the narrow lanes and by lanes of Goa. How did you decide to feature 6, and why these 6? Can you give us a brief overview of the book as well?
Sure. So to give an overview of the book, I'd like to start at the very end, the last chapter, which is the House of Reflections, home of family Colasso on the Mandovi riverfront in Ribandar. To quote homeowner Jyoti Botello, who you see on the screen behind me, "We have had many offers for this house. There was once a man from the Middle East who said he wants to buy it. I told him, you won't be able to afford it. And he said, yes, of course I can. I'll give you a blank check and you can write any amount you want. So I said, it is not that. If you buy the house, it is going to be just a house, like so many houses all over the world, but for us, it is home. And he said, gosh, you Indians are so emotional. And she said, yes, and we Goans are much more. I like this quote because it really sums up the character and spirit of the book, The Memory Keepers and Future Seekers, portraits of 6 heritage homes in Goa that were built during the colonial Portuguese era.
And why 6? Why these 6?
Why these 6? I wanted to make sure that in my book, I feature homes that are living and breathing, on which the ordinary humdrum moments of daily life continue to play out. And these are the moments that become quite extraordinary when framed through a viewfinder. Why only 6? During the research phase of the project, I visited several homes across the north and south of Goa before deciding to focus on 6. For me, it was important to capture, to strike that balance between breadth and depth in order to contextualize the work, but also to capture its very essence. So as you saw in the video, we featured 6 homes, which we have titled The House of Belongings, The House of Confluence, House of Dialogue, House of Duality, of Reflections, and Evergreen. These titles were given by us in order to represent the tangible but also the intangible attributes that made these homes unique.
Could we have the next image? And the next one? Yeah. And speaking of the tangible, here we have, it's interesting how Goa's architectural identity and its language changed from pre-Portuguese times, when the homes used to look, the rooms used to open out into this inner courtyard. It was more inward looking, it opened onto the angan. But with the Portuguese, it changed and became outside the home. And these in situ chairs, like the balcão, became the place of community, of gathering, of neighborly gossip, of hanging out, basically. Could you tell us more about this image, Ulka?
So what I like about this image is that it was a completely spontaneous moment in which, this is an image, first of all, from the Desa family that features the book as House of Belongings. So in this moment, as you can see, neither of them are conscious or aware of the camera, except maybe that dog on the right there. But what I like is the play of light, where the afternoon sun really spotlights Maria, who you see on your extreme right, and also the color echo in the image, where the colors of the foreground, the attire, echo the background architectural colors of yellow ochre and red oxide. So
I want to interrupt one observation. The 6 houses, that's really, I find that very impressive, because one of the challenges of self-publishing is how do you be concise? How do you limit what you're creating and really focus it? So I just want to commend that selection, and I've spent the last 2 days going through the book. It's so refined. The six houses, the 6 stories, they're so refined, and I congratulate you on that self-discipline. So also encouraging everyone that they'll enjoy the focus of the book as well.
Thank you, Robert. Actually, it was the discipline of my mentor in Lisbon, who really got me to tighten the edit and really tell a story that was succinct and concise rather than,
Yeah, it would diluted. Yeah.
Surround yourself with good mentors. That's the moral of that story.
So speaking of the intangible, there are so many cliched ways of looking at Goa as a place of either bohemian, hedonistic indulgence on its beaches, or as a place of sleepy, Susegad villages. But Goa is so much more than that. And going beyond the balcão, speaking to these homeowners and these stately, sophisticated homes, give one an entirely different understanding of Goa and of Goans. So Robert, how do you feel architecture gives context and character to a place and deepens one's understanding of a place?
Very intense question. No, I enjoy the story you shared about the blank check, because I think that character that she was expressing through that response, it's in line with the values a lot of the architecture expresses. And architects, we're often very nerdy. We talk about context and scale and sun and climate and all that, which is good. But I think fundamentally, architecture as an expression can be an expression of the values of the people that inhabit the spaces. And that's very scary when you look at much of the world today. But it's also exciting when you see houses like this where those values are things that, we feel are valuable, they're good, community, being welcoming. So I think I see this as a context of almost like what's within, coming out through the architecture, and then being sustained, because sustaining houses like these, running them is also very hard, very difficult, and you have to be really focused and committed. So that's my take on context of coming from within, as much as it is relating to the surroundings, climate, material, all of that.
Yes, and you had a comment, right, about Switzerland and Cape Town and the architecture and
Yeah,
how
so
it changes one's experience of a place.
in my experience, having lived in Cape Town and in Switzerland, I found that it was a heritage architecture that really spoke to me, be it the white gabled and thatched roofs of the Cape Dutch architecture, or be it the medieval architecture in the old towns in Switzerland, or the chalets in the alpine towns. I thought it was architecture that kind of lends this character of your experience to a place. Do you find the same, Robert, in the places you have visited, or?
Totally, although I grew up in South Carolina in the US, so we have cookie cutter houses, which is a totally different experience. But yeah, totally. Let's move on. I don't have value to add to that question now.
So, coming back to Goa and its architectural language, it's really interesting that, despite Goa was this sleepy little place, was the capital of the Portuguese Empire in the east, one of the largest maritime empires the world has ever seen. It was, this very sophisticated global trading hub. And despite 450 years of Portuguese rule, Goa's architecture is not fully Portuguese, but fully Goan, where you see an angan and an altar in the same built space, like we saw in the Fernandez home in Shandor, featured in the book as the House of Confluence, or in the Figueiredo home in Lutoli, which is featured as the House of Duality. We saw church chairs from the period of King Jose I sit side by side with furniture carved with motifs from Hindu mythology. So there is this whole confluence of, this hybrid of the indigenous, the cosmopolitan, and there's so much sort of going on, much beyond what you see or what you think of as. And we were also told that there are no homes like this in Portugal, right? And there are no homes in Portugal, in this style of architecture. So it's particularly and very local to Goa. Yeah. So, Ulka, you spent so much time in these homes documenting these spaces and the lives lived within these age-old walls. And your images are so layered in what they reveal, what they withhold. There are scenes within scenes in so many of them. What about this story resonates with you? You said some of it to begin with, but...
I'd like to answer that by reading this quote from the renowned Goan architect, Charles Correa. Certainly, architecture is concerned with much more than its physical attributes. It is a many-layered thing. Beneath and beyond the strata of function and structure, materials and texture, lie the deepest and most compulsive layers of all. So, as a photographer, in the early days, it was actually the architectural aesthetics of the home that drew me. Goan homes are so visually rich, they truly are a photographer's paradise. Right from the vibrant hued facades, to the textured and pigmented interior walls, to the glittering crystal chandeliers, the patterned mosaic floorings, and even the oyster shell windows. Everywhere I looked, there was something I could capture through my viewfinder. But the longer I worked on this project, I realized that it was not the physicality of the architecture or the antiques or the artifacts, but rather the stories and memories contained within them that in turn captured me. And it is these stories stories and memories that I believe form the emotional foundations of what makes a house a home.
So in line with what you were saying as well, and this Goan architect Dean de Cruz also said that at the end of the day, it's architecture is just a backdrop for human interaction. It's about the people. And there is this gentle emotive arc that flows through your images. And can you tell us about Yvonne's, can you change the image? About this particular image?
So this particular image is from the House of Evergreen, which is the home of family Menezes Braganza in the village of Shandor in South Goa. And here you see the family. So you see Yvonne on the extreme right, entertaining her friends over a long Sunday lunch. And here they are having their soup, starters, and shandy in their sala pequena before they moved on to the sala grande for the main meal. I like this image because it almost feels like you're right there as part of the group. And to read a quote from Rohan, who is Yvonne's son. For many years after celebrating New Year's Eve, we would all gather in this house for my grandmother's birthday on the 1st of January. The whole family would get together for lunch, and it was great. We had 100 to 150 guests. All my aunts, uncles, granduncles, cousins, families from all over the world, Brazil, Portugal, London, would come down, and we would have music in the ballroom and a huge feast. We would play all around the house. It was so much fun. Sadly, most of the older generation have passed, and the family doesn't get together anymore. It is the tours that keep the house a little lively now.
And can you tell us about the many-layered cover image and its significance to the book, The Memory Keepers?
The cover image is one of the many images within the pages of this book that are now forever etched in my memory. It is a portrait of a quintessential Goan home, that of family Viegas, which is situated at the end of a picturesque Ashoka tree-lined street in the village of Kurturi in South Goa. But at its core, it is a portrait of the elderly Marianne Viegas, and you can see her sitting right there. I like it because it's her fragile frame, framed through several solid teak wood door frames. You see through the corridor of frames within frames, all the way from the balcony outside, past the entrada, through the liminal space in which she sits, into the very heart of the home, the kitchen. But what I really love about this image is that we only catch a partial glimpse of her, and this creates a sense of mystery in terms of what she is doing. For example, when I first photographed her, I thought she was sitting at her breakfast table, having her morning cup of tea or coffee, when in fact she was sitting at her Bible table, practicing her morning ritual of coloring, an activity that was prescribed to her by her daughter to stimulate her mind and boost her memory. So as you can see, the narrative of this moment is also so very fitting to the narrative of the book, The Memory Keepers.
How old is she?
She is in her 80s. Yeah.
And that's such a poignant image, it really is. And, of course, in the book, one gets a glimpse of these majestic homes, but it's more the memories and stories that take center stage. And memory isn't something linear. It's not rigid. It's not controllable. It's not even particularly reliable. But it's so deeply personal. And it's, in a few years, there may be no one left to tell these stories. So, and I found it really fascinating because, meeting the memory keepers and seeing the ways in which they hold memory. This is Rafael Vegas, Marianne's husband, actually. And he's 92, and it was very special. Ulka and I were invited to his 92nd birthday. There was only immediate family present. And Rafael he's sitting in his grand sala, or ballroom, which he's converted into a library. And he has this huge collection of rare books in English and Portuguese, records and documents. He cuts out clippings from the newspaper every morning. And he's built this huge archive on the history of Goa. Here he's holding a copy of the Illustrated Weekly, probably from 1980. And the cover story asks, is Goa a paradise? And inside there's a feature on the hippies, who became synonymous with Goa, the iconic hippies. So he holds memory. He's a real keeper in that sense. And then we have, Maria Teresa Colasso. And here she's... and she's sitting sort of gracefully at the head of her 20-seater rosewood dining table. She lived in this breathtaking home by the river and featured in the book as the House of Reflections. She has her caretaker by her side. And Maria Teresa was losing her memory, so her nephew Tonito and his wife Jyoti took her to their home. And they told us they had to take her back because even though she lost her speech, she kept indicating that she wanted to be back home. And I really found that profoundly moving because even though she couldn't remember anything, she remembered she wanted to be back in her own home. And she felt that powerful pull, of the universal instinct for home. So Robert, you as an architect, how do you see, what is your experience? You've also lived in several homes and now making Bangalore your home. And how do you see architecture as going beyond as a conduit to time and memory?
You've spoken about her. I'm going to branch and talk about something completely different because you've reminded me.
Okay.
So my grandmother is 101.
Oh, wow.
And her memory's starting to fade. So every weekend, my mother lives about 3 hours from her, from my grandmother. Every weekend she comes up, and what does she want? She wants to go home. And she stays in a nursing care. It's a universal thing.
Yeah.
So it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
So what was your question? I forgot. I was thinking about my grandmother.
Yeah. No, even my grandma passed away when she was 101 too, and she was very special. So my question was, how do you see architecture as? I think you pretty much answered that.
Yeah, there we go.
And also your own experience, if you can share. You made Bangalore your home now.
Speaking of books, the books photo was lovely.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of home, I was thinking back in Bombay. I lived in Bombay for 16 years. I had 5 homes. First was a paying guest, then I lived in an SRA scheme, then another paying guest, and then to a 1 BHK. I had almost nothing. But the only consistent thing was books. So where the books are, that's where home is. That's it. And so I like the image of Raphael. Yeah, holding the Illustrated Weekly. Because I was actually reading that story this morning. And I was thinking I would love to visit his home and see his collection.
Yeah, he's amazing.
He's quite incredible because each time we visited and we were having a candid conversation about whatever the topic was, he remembers exactly what book or magazine or document that conversation
he pulls
is.
out something and he says, you must have a look at this.
Yeah.
And, so
and that's very rare.
That's very rare.
To find someone who knows every book in their collection. What are the stories behind it? Where is it?
He really does.
Hundreds, thousands of pieces. Yeah.
And a couple of weeks ago, we launched at the Opera House in Bombay, and I was talking to Raphael and saying, and he was congratulating us, and he said, that's so perfect because the Opera House was built by a Goan. So I said, oh, I didn't know that. He said, hardly anybody knows that. So I said, how do you know that? Because he knows everything about everything. And he started telling me about this architect or this builder. And, he told me about his daughter. He told me where he lived. He told me, there was an award instituted. So he was like a really rounds off the gaps in, whatever we are learning about these homes.
Has everyone here been to Opera House in Bombay? Some, no? When you stand on the street in that area and you look, the only building that has power and presence is Opera House.
Yeah,
and it's amazing.
So we have that connection too. Yeah. And now we are at MAP, which is the Museum of Art and Photography, perfectly fitting for our book. Ulka, you crisscross the world in your quest for images. You've lived in 4 countries across 4 continents, as you said. And with this book, you're looking at the lives and families of people who've lived in this one home for generations. What has this process of working on the Memory Keepers meant to you? Was it a kind of homecoming for you too?
So having lived in 4 countries across 4 continents for 2 decades, I finally returned to India and soon after began this photographic exploration documenting the old Goan homes. And indeed, it was a homecoming of sorts, Samira, because as I worked on this 4-year-long documentary process, I began to feel right at home in Goa. You know, Goa is truly so special, and in particular, these homes. They have seen the rise and fall of a whole empire. The land they stand on changed from being a Portuguese state for 450 years to then becoming a part of India upon liberation in 1961. But apart from these histories at large, these homes have really been witnesses to life. They have seen everything from childhood mischief, love, longing, and loss, festivities and faith, babies being born, elders passing. Entire cycles of life have played out within their walls several times over through generations and centuries. With the 6 families that we featured, it's really been their deep-rooted connectedness to the home and the land that moved me. It got me reflecting on my own sense of belonging and what home really meant to me. You know, I feel in this way, this has been way beyond a photographic exploration. It was also somewhat a journey of self-discovery. And as the iconic photographer Ansel Adams rightly says, the lens looks both ways.
Could you share a memory or a story from the book that reflects this deep sense of attachment to home?
So this is a picture of homeowners Fatima and Pedro Figueiredo in their home in Latauli in South Goa, which features in the book as the House of Duality. Both mother and son moved back from Lisbon to look after their family home and maintain its history. Fatima told us that this house was requested by the Indian government twice, immediately after liberation by Jawaharlal Nehru and some years later by Indira Gandhi. She sent some ministers to the home to negotiate a deal, but the grand aunt at the time said, no, this is a family home. And the ministers told her that, it's the Prime Minister of India who's asking you, you cannot tell her no. And she said, yes, of course I can. She is not my mother-in-law.
And that's Fatima for you. Yeah.
So here is another image of Pedro in his, fiddling around with his art objects. And here too, you get a partial glimpse of the grand sala that he's in. That is part of their house, which is over 400 years and is known to have, or believed to have predated the Taj Mahal.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know, it is
That's
amazing.
unbelievable.
Yeah. And it's true, architecture can, really transport you. And apart from sharing memories and stories of the past, this book also serves to spark a conversation about the futurity of these homes. And as Alvaro Vega says, of his Vegas home, featured in the book as the House of Dialogue, Goan homes are not merely the memory keepers, they are also future seekers. The house grows and lives with you. Nothing is permanent, everything is in transition, and change is inevitable. So Robert, how do you see the relevance of these historic homes in current times and the role and importance of architectural conservation?
So I have 3 things spinning in my mind from what you've just shared. So I'm going to try and quickly jump into them. The first thought is, so we live in a deeply digital world, right? Everything, we're taking photos on our phone. We have thousands and thousands of photographs. And most of it will get lost, right? It'll evaporate within 10, 15 years. My wife has this really excellent, I'll say habit, but it's just hard work. She prints every year. She'll compile like 100 family photos and print them in a book and keep them. It's like a scrapbook, like a contemporary scrapbook. Yesterday, our son, he was on vacation, so he was bored out of his mind. He's laying on the sofa looking at the photos when he was like 3 years old, right? He loved it. He was loving it because he was looking at his past in a way that was so tangible. And that's what books like this do. They take, if you Google search heritage homes of Goa, you'll find a million photographs online, right? It's endless, the amount of content. But when you actually take the effort, you put in that hard work of printing it, of curating it beautifully, laying it out beautifully, printing it beautifully, it's special. So that's why I'm very excited to learn this is 400 years old, because even if in 200 years this house is gone, there is a record which will survive beyond our USB ports and our digital
That's what you said.
evaporative
There's such
cloud.
a strong archival quality to
yeah,
these images,
exactly.
because it won't exist in a few years.
Exactly, but books will.
But books will.
Books will. They sustain. They won't go out of date.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thought. Second thought, the future of the homes. Coming back to my grandma, who's 101, I like to think of conservation of buildings. So the boring architect answer is we learn from the past, blah, blah, which is all fine. That's good, right? That's correct. But I have a slightly different take. So my grandmother's 101. 2 years ago, we went and we interviewed her. And one of the questions we asked was, what's your advice for young people, right? And we thought she'd talk for 30 minutes. She said, the world is so challenging and so different now. I have no advice because I'm confident that young people, they can figure it out and be strong and sound in their decisions. And now, whether you agree with that or not is, that's a separate thing. But it was just such a nice voice to hear. And I think old buildings with character like these, they have voice, right? Now, whether or not it's something you like aesthetically or would want to maintain, that's totally different. But they have a voice, and that voice is important. So I'd like to think of conservation and the futureness of these homes as a way of sustaining that voice and keeping us from getting distracted in the noise of our current world. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. That's an interesting way to look at it. Ulka, can you tell us a little more about your photography practice?
So in this particular project, I have used the documentary approach to build a narrative, which means that I have featured the protagonist, in this case the homeowners, in the environment, the context of their homes. I also have several wide-angle shots of the space in which they inhabit. Then there are close-up shots of the architectural details, be it the home altars, the reading rooms, the china ceramics. In general, in my photography practice, I like to use light, shadow, color, and composition to really create a sense of intrigue and a mood in my images. Going back in time, I think my journey with photography started in the early 80s when my dad gifted me my first red Olympus camera. I remember I was down with chicken pox and was in home quarantine, but I actively photographed everything in sight. Since then, a camera's been my constant companion over the years, but it was really when I was back in home quarantine due to the pandemic lockdown that my love for the craft developed further.
When the pandemic was happening, I'm not kidding, I'm being completely honest, I thought to myself, there are artists whose lives will be changed by the work that they will do during this time. So I'm so happy to hear this. You're one of those people.
What came out of it? Your book too.
Your book too, yeah.
So and the world is richer for it, yeah. So before we wrap, can you read us an excerpt from the book?
How much time do we have? Are we finished?
No, you can.
We have 10 minutes more? Okay, great.
Let her read the excerpt.
So I started this conversation at the end of the book, and now I'd like to end this part of the conversation by going to the very beginning, an excerpt from the foreword by art historian Nicole Ann Lobo, who is currently doing her PhD on Goan art history. There's an old saying about history and memory. Where histories falter, memories take the reins. Goans are not a people without history, but inheritors of competing histories constructed over millennia, shaped through centuries of colonial rule. Often misunderstood as merely hybrid, Goan identities occupy a liminal space, the realm of the simultaneously indigenous and cosmopolitan. Where histories have imperfectly captured this liminality, Goan's memories have filled in the gaps.
Thanks. Robert, you would like to.
So I am intrigued. I want to hear, I'm a lot of questions. I'm diving into self-publishing, if that's okay, because it's hard work. It's really hard work. I want to know how many years, you kind of answered with the pandemic, but how many years have gone into this? And what's the process, what was the process like for you from taking the photographs to where we are today, that there's a book sitting outside? Can you share a little bit about that experience, journey, the team, all of that?
So it was a 4-year-long process that started, as I mentioned, during the pandemic with me reflecting on the meaning of home, coming across this book from Prabhuda Dasgupta, and then actually going to Goa, taking a tour with a local company there and going inside these homes. I have to say, Robert, the photographs that I took in the very initial stages were very different from what you see here today. In that, they were mostly photographs of the spaces, the architectural details and such. Because really to form that kind of trust where people let you into their private sphere of their homes takes time. It's a relationship that has been built over a period of 4 years with, of course, art writer Samira coming in and us going, speaking to the homeowners over a period of time, visiting them.
And just to interrupt, our process involved lots of Porto. Lots of lunches and dinners and prawn rishois, and yeah, we had a really good time. Yeah.
That's true, and I'd like to add also that it was a very collaborative process in which even the homeowners had a say in the way they wanted to be portrayed, the stories they wanted to share, and also in terms of the book itself, where they had ideas that we then integrated into the narrative. So it was a very collaborative process between not only me and Samira, also the homeowners, and also a few others who have contributed content to the book.
But I'm going to go one step deeper. Like, okay, you have the photographs, you have the idea of the book, then what? How did you, did you Google search book designers? Did you Google search publishers?
Well, actually,
how can I do it myself?
Actually, that's an interesting question. I did not Google search. I Google searched who your book designer was. I was so impressed by your book, Robert. I actually Google searched who your designer was and ended up working with her.
Amazing team.
Beautifully designed.
Amazing team.
And it's a beautiful book. So, yeah.
So Studio Anugraha.
Studio Anugraha. And I have to say that this book would have been a nightmare to produce had it not been for all these lovely collaborators that I have worked with.
Yeah, this is the fantastic thing about the self-publishing world, is generally everyone shares, they're very generous as a general, as a culture, and they're very talented. So like Deshna and Carol worked on it.
Deshna and Carol
Deshna
did in the
Carol.
initial phases,
Yeah,
and then
and then other team members, I'm sure, jumped in. But they're excellent designers. And you'll see it when you look at the book. Every line, whether it's a line, an alignment of an image, a text block, everything is specific. It's a piece of art, and I mean that from deep within, because I know that they and the designers they put everything into it. And when you pick the book up, you'll feel it. You'll feel the gravity that someone really cares for what they've created. So well done.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, sure. Would you, Shilpa, would you?
Okay, we can open out to a couple of audience questions.
You have all done very well braving the rain. Great. Well done.
One small question. When you say that architecture captures the memories and the stories of what the families have been through, is it only the good memories, or because we know that Portuguese have had dark stories as well during that colonization time? So does it capture that as well, or is it just the happy memories?
I'll say it. Well, I mean, we haven't really specifically talked about any dark memories, but the whole, the way the book is, or the way we approach the book rather when we were talking to them, it's their personal stories, their intimate memories, but it's also all these major life-changing events that happened in Goa. Colonization, the Inquisition, liberation. So much happened, and there are a few memories of, I mean, one homeowner talks about how his mother had the first gun license. Somebody else showed us bullet holes through which, when liberation happened. And so there are all these underpinnings to their personal memories and stories. But this is the larger backdrop against which this, because 450 years is a long period of time, and every home is not that old, but they have seen all these momentous events happening, or heard from their ancestors, and So.
I think for the most part, with the generations that we spoke with, they had fond memories of the Portuguese colonial times. And the dark side that happened was perhaps in the previous generations, and so they didn't really encounter that.
But that's the amazing thing of old spaces, is that they challenge us to think, like, within these walls, what could have happened? Like, it's amazing. And you don't think that when you step into an apartment built 5 years ago, So that's the other power of human imagination with old architecture. Lovely question. I like that.
Hi, my name is Neera. Thank you so much for a lovely talk. And so my question is, what sort of challenges did you come across when you had to photograph for the project and you had to write? So yeah, any approaches and yeah.
I think the biggest challenge in any documentary project is really getting access. In this case, building the trust with the families, the homeowners. That was a challenge initially with especially few of the homes, but with all our countless visits every time I was in Goa, we really, were able to overcome that. And we, like Samira said, developed relationships with the homeowners where we would sit and chat with them over glasses of porto or cups of coffee, prawn rissoy. And it really, it was a challenge which then, we were able to overcome.
So I like your answer, because the Bombay Imagine book that they referenced, my biggest challenge was also access to libraries and content.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, you want to get something,
Yes.
but the person who has that has this power. And, it can be hard to build that trust to access the power.
Librarians have all the power. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for the lovely talk. And I'm Karthik. I just have two questions. The first question is about the cover page. And I'm just curious to know as to why the memory keepers are big and bold, but the future seekers seem to be kind of small and cold. I don't know why. The other question that I have is, I know that these people, all that which you were explaining about the kind of the people, the connect and all that, I thought the connect is about the life that they've lived there. But what is the connect with the architecture as such? I mean, is that something coming up there?
To answer your second question, the connect with the architecture, because I feel like the homes themselves are also the keepers of memory, as much as the occupants, as much as the objects. So, everything contained within these walls are keepers of memory in that sense. In terms of the title of the book, it is a two-pronged title, and, for the most part, the story is about memories that these homes. But also as a subplot, we've explored this theme of the future, which is how and what can these homes do to sustain themselves or adapt to the present and sustain in the future. And that is kind of a sub-theme that kind of flows through the book in terms of provoking these kind of conversations. So since that's a sub-theme, we decided to deboss the title, which again was actually a take from Robert's Bombay Imagined book.
Inspirational.
I'll answer it slightly different way. Correct me if I'm wrong. And future seekers, there's no print. It's just debossed.
It's just debossed.
Right? So the future seekers, it doesn't exist yet. Right? It's an impression only. It's not something that's been made and it's there.
It's sort of a play on the idea that
it comes into focus.
Yeah, the future is unclear and unknown, and which is why the title was debossed.
Yeah. That's what, and that stands on that point. Every line, every printed component of the book, every texture, every change in level has a purpose. And that only happens when you work intensely with designers, which they did. Yeah.
Hi. I have a question. Many people say art comes when you really miss something in your life, which is you are looking for. So what are your views on this? Thank you.
What's the question?
Art comes when you're missing something in life, and what are you looking for, right? So yours was during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think for me it was kind of the search for home, because having moved around so much, I was constantly, going through literally real estate brokers and property listings, and always kind of searching for a house, but in the bigger sense, searching for home. And I think that's what, sparked this whole idea of wanting to do a project that revolved around the topic of home.
Hi. Being an architect, I feel every time I go into a heritage home for any restoration or a renovation work, I feel the walls speak to me. So did you experience anything like that? That's one question. And the other one, just taking off on the topic which we were on, the future seekers. Did you all get to talk to them about the future of these homes? Because I think the younger generation, most of them have flown out, and most of them are settled abroad, as I seen from the most of these heritage homes in Goa. So what is the future of these homes? Did any of the people here even speak about it?
So we did approach this kind of question with them about how they see the future of their own homes. Of course, a lot of these families are very emotionally connected to the home, and so probably their answer was, seeing it from that perspective of wanting to hold on to it. But realistically, I'm not sure what the future is. A lot of the homes have started doing things to keep the home self-sustaining, like they offer tours, or they've converted a part of it into a museum, or they run a boutique hotel from the homes. So this kind of, I think, keeps them going for a bit longer than, I guess, yeah. In terms of the walls also, I think a lot of the walls, everything within the walls, from the patinated texture to the, the pigments of color used in them, the old portraits of ancestors that hang on those walls, the ceramics, everything has a story and history behind it.
They are very eloquent walls. Yeah.
Strangely enough, I've been to one of these homes. The Braganza house, actually. Very close friends of my parents. In fact, they stayed there last week. with Ivona, yeah, with Yvonne, yeah.
And she couldn't be here because she
I just sent her the message and I sent her a picture to tell her. So I've been to that home. Yeah. And my mom was actually, it's in line with her question as well about what's the future of these beautiful, amazing homes with so much history. Because I understand that the Braganza home is part of a trust. And, is there anything like governments can do to, preserve
we hear
this.
murmurs that they're making Shandor a heritage village.
Yeah.
There is a heritage action group in
Yeah,
Goa.
because I think...
But I mean, I don't know.
Do you think
I think
books
mostly
like
it's
this
left to
can,
homeowners to, find ways to
but the
sustain
government
these.
has nothing to do with...
Not so
they
far.
can't.
But we're hoping in some small way also our book will
Yes,
draw
I was
attention to these homes.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe that could be a nice
I
way.
keep thinking, what would Goa be without these homes?
Exactly.
So if you just think they didn't exist, let's just have cookie cutter flats and homes, what would Goa be? So it is important to keep them going, to, one likes looking at them, even if you never go into one.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, on your next trip to Goa, do take a tour of these homes. They're really transportive. So.
Hi. So when you started writing and photography, what emotions went through you when you started, and how did it end? How did you transcend through those emotions? And same thing with the homeowners.
For me, I think it brought back a lot of memories of, my childhood, growing up in an ancestral extended family home, and what that meant for me. Because if I reflect back on it, it is really, moving around from country to country. I think it was this upbringing and this rootedness of my ancestral family home in Bombay that allowed me that, the freedom. It gave me the roots, but allowed me to fly in that sense. And I think it was the memories that it stirred within me and the emotions within me from my own childhood that this project brought about.
Just curious, where in Bombay was your childhood home?
It's in Villepale West in the suburbs. Yeah.
And, to come back to your comment, when one of the first homes we visited was the Condillac home. And when I was talking to Vicent Condillac, and he was talking about how his older bachelor uncles used to live in this home. And it was quite a mess, and, but he didn't want to, he said he would visit and he would, not interfere and everything. And he said, I didn't want to disturb their way of life. I didn't want to disturb anything, even though it needed a lot of, renovation and whatever, because that would mean I would disturb their way of life. And that really sort of resonated with me, because I feel, I spent a lot of time with my grandmother and got me thinking about older people, and everyone's getting older, all our parents and grandparents and so on. And it's a nice thing to leave them alone. Not alone, but not to meddle in their way of life, because that's their routine, that's what they're used to, that's their comfort zone, their security. So I think for me it made a lot of sense, and that really touched me.
Yeah, thank you so much for the talk. My question is to you. It's more like when you have a photo book, which is like documentary kind of book, how do you approach the writing about it? Like, is it like more conversational? Is it like more anecdotal, or like how do you approach that, and how it was for you, like the experience?
Okay. So, Robert, you said you said something about the voice and it should be heard. And I was also thinking there are a lot of voices in this book, and it's mostly the homeowners. We have the Goan homeowners recounting their memories and their stories of living in these homes, what it means to them. And wherever possible, we have tried to, or when I was writing it, I have tried to keep it as close to their thoughts and emotions and, as close to their life histories as they have told us.
Okay, a related follow-up question, actually. I just wanted to ask, because you made a choice to feature 6 of these houses, whether the photographs dictated some of the choices, or whether the stories dictated the narratives, or was it a mix of them? What came first in that sort of?
I think Samira and I work very well together in a collaborative kind of partnership. So sometimes it was the photographs that came and inspired her words, and sometimes it was her words, and she would have ideas of what what she wanted to write and what I could portray from a visual standpoint. So I think, yeah, it was a mix of both.
I have a theoretical question. If there were no limits in the world and the book could be as big as you wanted and reality did not matter, how many houses could be in this book?
So initially, I had the plan of covering 20 homes, 10 in the north, few in the north, few in the south, and few in Panjim was the idea. But somewhere, and few Hindu homes, some Catholic homes, some bigger homes, some smaller homes. Until, I was speaking once to Alvaro Villegas from the Villegas home, which features as the House of Dialogue. And he's an architect turned future tech entrepreneur. And he told me that, Ulka, your book is not about geography, it's not about socioeconomics, or it's not about religion. It's about homes being the keepers of memory. And you don't really need, to portray a whole lot of them to drive this point across. And that kind of resonated with me. And that's what I was referring to previously when I said it was also the homeowners who brought their ideas and their contributions to the book.
That's fantastic. Nice.
And I think, coming back, just a comment on 6 homes and how many homes and, But it's also these homes and these homeowners, we really like the fact that they are real custodians of their homes. They have this sense of protectiveness and this sense of deep attachment, which I think really, they're not in ruins, they're not just visited once in a while as an ancestral home. They're living there and caring for these very actively,
So follow-up question. No.
Yeah, during the process, when we visited, during the research phase, several Goan homes, there were many that were beautiful, but where the family didn't live, they only visited there to celebrate their festivals. And those were not the type of homes that interested me.
This kind of scares me then. That means these are rare. Rare. Yeah. Where they're deeply lived in.
And they're to be treasured.
And treasured, and they're not just possessions that are like investments for, future. Wow. They're very rare in that sense.
Hi, my name is Varghese. Actually, what got me interested in about this topic, I'm an artist and art educator. One of my friends sent about this program, and the memory keepers, the title got interested. And actually, I am also thinking about that memory and also because we are into living in a time of memoryless, because we don't have that much of experience, we don't have any kind of those things. And when you take this title into that book, have you ever think about why people are keep thinking back to go home every time? I have seen so many people want to go home at the time of their elderly period. They want to go. I am coming from Kerala, and many of them want to go back to home, even though they have big flat and here they want to go home back. Why have you ever think about these kind of things? The memory and the where you lived in the early childhood days. Have you ever think about that?
So in some ways, yes, because when we showed the portrait of Maria Teresa Colasso, who was losing her memory and she wanted to go home. And that's what touched me, that, you can't remember anything, but you can remember this is not your home and I want to go home. It's such a powerful instinct almost. And I think it's a universal human instinct. And it's also like I said, don't meddle with people's way of life. Like if you have an elderly parent or grandparent, if you rearrange their room, home it's a feeling, it's an emotion, it's your things, it's what you're familiar with, and security. And it's, I don't know, it's a comfort, I suppose.
So I have 2 comments on that. One, I think it would be a great PhD topic, like from the scientific point of view.
Yes.
What's the science in this draw, right? That even people who have lost their memory can yet feel that. And second thought on it is, our cat is new to Bangalore. She'll roam the neighborhood, but she always comes home. So I think she smells it, is what I understand, right? It's scent.
So it's a smell.
So yeah.
Yeah, but it is.
So I'm curious. I encourage you to pursue a PhD in the science of why we as humans want to go home, because I'm sure there's a science to it, and I'm sure it's fascinating also.
Maybe it's like the homing instinct.
I have.
How the cat came home.
In my research, I have one more thing. In my research, I have seen one thing. The whoever lost their memory also, they want to go back home. And when my researching on neuroscience, actually, we in our hippocampus, we have a kind of cell that called as memory place cells. They called as place cells. Everybody have, even animals have, because of so much of birds are flying from Siberia to India, and they are going back. Even salmon fish is coming to Atlantic Ocean, they're going back. Everyone, most of the living animal have these kind of memory cells, and it's called as place cells. And really interested to know that, because of, even though people lost their memory, most of them want to go home. They only though, I think the last thing is happening into the brain is losing the hippocampus, because everything, if you are losing every memory, it will be there. I think the last one is hippocampus. So people have this notion to go back home. I just feel like that, because also I'm looking into that memory thing. So it's very interesting thing to know from neuroscience.
Fantastic. So I recommend in the second edition of the book, please, Borges is your name? Burgess. You please do the afterword for the second edition.
Yeah, that was
okay.
lovely.
I think it would be a fantastic addition.
All right, on that note, that perhaps you all should think of a second book so that we all have the pleasure of reading that too. Thank you so much, Ulka, Samira, and Robert, for this very insightful and fabulous evening, for the book you have written and shared with all of us. Thanks to all of you for spending your time here at MAP on a Saturday evening with the rain and all of that. If this is your first time at MAP, please know that there are 4 ongoing exhibitions, one of which Outside In is only on until this weekend, so it will close tomorrow. So if you don't or haven't had the opportunity to see it yet, please do see if you can take a look before you leave, or come back and visit us. You can see what else is happening here at the museum, all of our upcoming exhibitions and programs on our website, or you can follow us on social media or subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated. So thank you and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Shilpa.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Robert.